Welcome from the Music City Center, Nashville, Tennessee. We're here at the EMS World Expo, the largest EMS dedicated event in the world. This is EMS World Presents Stories from Expo. Your story continues here.
Okay. Hello, we're here in Nashville at EMS World Expo 2018. This is the EMS Garage / EMS World podcast. I'm here with Emma Hand, who has a poster presentation, and it's actually an interesting. I had some rural experience about 2.5 years, and cell coverage. It's interesting. We had a protocol that said, you know, if you can't get cell coverage, then do this, right?
Oh, really?
And in the metro, you don't really have that problem. You looked at cell coverage and patient outcome?
Yeah. So we looked on the effect of cell coverage on whether or not the patient was going to be dead on arrival in a cardiac arrest situation. And we found that in the county we looked at, there was a 64% more chance the patient would be dead on arrival if they had poor cell coverage than if they had excellent cell coverage.
A 64% chance?
Yeah.
Is that because, and working in a rural setting, anecdotally, I would say, oftentimes that population tends to not call right away in the first place. So, I mean, there's obviously a number of probable factors, but how can you fix that?
You can't really. We try to control for like poverty, socioeconomic status and age, stuff like that, to try to fix for whether or not they even have cell phones in the first place. We also know there's confounding variables with transport times. Already, if they're in a rural setting, there's going to be long transport times. The geographic location is going to be hard to navigate, going up mountains, mountainous roads and places like that. But as far as trying to fix like having them call earlier or getting cell phones, that's going to be kind of a hard problem.
Yeah, that would be. And was this restricted to specific dispatch determinants or say chief complaints by the patient?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
We tried to look at a number of chief complaints that were time sensitive, such as cardiac arrest, trauma, respiratory. Unfortunately, the data we got back was only decent enough for cardiac arrest, so that's the main chief complaint we looked at. But that is that's a time-sensitive emergency medical situation, and that was the main chief complaint we looked at when we're getting the data from that county.
Wow, 64% higher probability of being dead on arrival.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're any amount of time without CPR in a cardiac arrest situation is highly detrimental to survivability.
Right. So that's why we were saying the research has already said that cell phones can be considered a part of the chain of survival at this point. And cell phones are obviously really important, trying to contact dispatch as quick as possible. There's also new apps coming out, like showing bystanders how to do CPR or alerting people nearby that there's someone that needs medical aid. But if there's no cell service, then that all kind of just goes away. And so my main point was cell phone providers need to start getting close to 90 to 100% coverage, even in these areas. It just is really important for them to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe this is beyond what you were studying or what you were looking at, but is there a large decrease in landlines? Do people, even in the elderly population, are people just dropping landlines, and so now everybody is becoming dependent on their cell phones?
I think so, maybe. Yeah. And the big thing with that too is if they fell outside or they're alone and no one can get back inside the house to get to the landline, then that kind of defeats the purpose as well. So I was kind of just like taking all of that into consideration, taking it all into account, and just trying to figure out like what the best way would be for these rural communities, because I go to school in a rural community. Often when you're hiking, there's no service out on the trails, or there's no service even in town in some places, and especially no service where these people are out like in isolated locations where they're living. So it's just really scary, and we don't need that. We don't need cell coverage to be a problem in them getting medical attention.
And do you find, again, might be beyond what you looked at, do these rural areas only have one option? So like if you live out in the boondocks, or I don't know what the, you're stuck with Verizon because that's the only a Verizon tower, or is
potentially,
So-
yeah. When I was looking at the cell coverage maps, there were a lot of places where, yeah, it was only Verizon covering this area, or it might be Verizon and AT&T, for example, but there's just a lot of places where it's just one or two, like one or two cell phone companies, and there's
Yeah.
just a lot of places that have none, no coverage at all. So no company is trying to go out there. And I know there's a lot of that goes into it, you know, financial reasons and geographic location kind of affects where you can put cell phone towers. But I'm thinking that the more people, like if there's going to be more cellular coverage, more people will be likely to buy phones, and they'll realize, oh, there's actually coverage. I can buy a phone, it'll actually work, and like it'll be beneficial in the long run.
Well, there you go. It's important to, sometimes when companies have a monopoly, they don't tend to care, much care what kind of service they give, but maybe it's a good reason for our public health services to, especially if you're in an area with low coverage or one service provider,
right,
get on their back and say, hey, this is affecting people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I know it's expensive to build cell phone towers, but is anything so expensive that it's worth more than someone's life is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
Especially something that matters to me is my grandparents live out in a rural community, and often back in the past I remember I didn't have cell phone coverage with them either. And while that's annoying, on a daily basis, like to teenagers, like, oh man, I can't get on Instagram or social media, it actually becomes a huge problem when you're needing to contact emergency medical services and you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know where you can go from there. Do you have any suggestions or tips or?
No, and I'm not sure where I'm trying to go with the project either. I'm not sure. Some people have asked if I want to take it to telecommunication companies and try to show them like this is a real issue. And at this point, I'm not sure. I know we would need to conduct more research because it was just a limited geographic location we looked at. We would need to expand the research to larger sample size, larger geographic locations, and kind of see where the research goes from there.
I suppose that's the first step of anything.
Yep.
Get the information. Well, good luck. I hope you, and if you do decide to get more information and continue, I hope you have good luck and hopefully can make a difference, because it sounds like with those kind of 64%.
Yeah.
It sounds like
it was
you could make a
surprising.
difference, so.
I was surprised.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to us here at EMS World and EMS Podcast. I am Aaron Gutzman. This is EMS World Podcast, EMS Garage from Nashville at EMS World Expo 2018.